Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where the good stuff, it'll always come in pints.
West Hall, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and as always, I'm here with the man of the West, the Aragorn's my Aemir, Alan Sisto.
Aw, thank you, Sean. How you doing tonight?
Doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing good. You know, after our last episode, it was a pretty heavy episode about life, death, immortality. What's it going to be like, the afterlife for man? This week we get a little bit, I'm going to say lighter, but it's still pretty heavy-duty stuff, of the coming of the elves and the captivity of Melkor. Should be a really good chapter.
And we're finally getting into some characters that aren't angels or gods, which is kind of nice.
It is nice. We're going to start actually meeting, well, I was about to say people, but I think the word is elves.
Indeed, children. Let's call them children.
The elder children, indeed. Well, before we get into the chapter, though, I know you mentioned that we have some mail in Bartleman's mailbag. What does he have for us tonight?
We do, actually. We've got a listener, Frederick, in Malmö, Sweden. I hope I'm saying that correctly, Frederick.
I apologize for Sean if he isn't.
50-50 on that one. We'll see what he says. But so Frederick wrote to us on Twitter. So a few days prior to the release of our It is a Gift episode, Frederick wrote to us on Twitter and said, I'm really looking forward to this episode. I hope you are talking about why Eru gave the gift of death to the dwarves as well.
We kind of left the dwarves out of that conversation.
And then we didn't get to it. So
At all.
Not at all. So sorry about that, Frederick.
My apologies.
We just had so much to cover with just elves and men.
We did.
But I did go back and look because I thought that somebody might ask this question. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot to go on with regard to the elves, but we do know from the Silmarillion, actually back in chapter 2, when we talk about the creation of the dwarves, we do see that the dwarves themselves believe that after they die, they go to Mandos in halls set apart, and that Ilúvatar will hallow them and give them a place among the children.
Lower ceilings in those halls, I imagine.
I'm sure, and they're probably pretty deep underground to make them comfortable.
Of course.
So they do believe that Ilúvatar will give them a place among the children in the end, and that their part shall be to serve Aule and to aid him in the remaking of Arda after the last battle. So that seems to me like, according to the dwarves' own belief, they are actually going to have a role in Arda Remade, which we talked about last time. And, it seems then that if that is true, and then if Finrod's prediction that we talked about in the Athrabeth is true, that the elves would have a place there as well, it seems that, all three of the free races will have a place in Arda Remade, and it sounds like each will bring their own unique gifts to making it a better place.
Well, the one thing to keep in mind that it looks like is that they're a little bit more similar to the dwarves in the sense that after their death, they go to Mandos, whereas with men, they know not where they go. The elves know not where. And that their home is outside the circles of the world. So they have a role that is, men have a role to play, perhaps in the remaking of Arda, but not in the same context that the dwarves do. It seems it's interesting. They're not. Their home is of the world, and that makes sense because they're made of. They're made
of the earth, right?
Made of the earth,
right?
More so than either of the other two. But it's interesting because what we know is only what the dwarves believe about themselves. It is their belief. They say that Aule cares for them and gathers them separately, and that he declared that Ilúvatar will hallow them. We don't really, we don't know for sure. It is speculation. It may be that Aule indeed told them that, and that he was wrong. I mean, we have no idea.
It's happened before.
It has happened. Aule has made a mistake or two. But one would like to think that he was being, clear about it. But of course, it is unclear, and it's meant to be unclear. I think.
I think it is
a speculative piece. And that's okay, because we don't have that third piece to plug in. There's a really nice distinction between the elves and men, and dwarves don't really fit into that.
There's kind of a symmetry or a juxtaposition with elves and men, and dwarves are somewhere in the middle. They don't really neatly fit into that.
No, they don't, and that makes sense because, of course, they weren't part of the
original plan, right?
Right. So. Yeah, I mean, it does look like they will. They're Fey'a, at least, if if that's what you want to call it, will live on in the halls of Mandos, and that they will return at the end to help with remaking Arda after the last battle. But it's to serve Aule, interestingly enough.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
the men we know are definitely there to do Ilúvatar's will. That's their purpose.
I wonder if there's anything in the fact that the dwarves are actually laboring, to rebuild Arda Remade.
Like almost a purgatorial sort of thing.
I wonder. Yeah, I mean, Tolkien.
I don't know.
Being a Catholic, I wonder. They're sort of working for their place. I don't know. I could be reading too much into it, but it's interesting.
It is. It's speculation, but it's interesting speculation. Good question.
Yeah, good question. Thank you very much, Frederick. And hopefully the episode lived up to your expectations despite missing the dwarves, and hopefully we've sort of made up for it here.
Well, I hope so, even though we still can't give you a conclusive answer.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else in the bottom of the bag there? Did Bold Barley have anything for us?
The only other thing that I had here that I actually just wanted to mention a clarification, because we got some comments on this. In the last episode, again, we talked briefly about the fact that Fea and Hroa don't exactly correspond to spirit and body. And then I think one of us said, yeah, we should look up what that distinction is. And I don't think we ever
did.
it. Right.
That's what happens when we wander back and forth on a topic for an hour and a half. And
yeah, exactly. Well,
don't lose our minds.
Don't leave us free to philosophize for an hour and a half, because we will forget where we started. But but I did go back and look at the passage that I was thinking about that talked about this, and it is actually in Morgoth's Ring. Okay. It's on page 330. I
don't have that one handy. I didn't prep for that, so you'll have to read that one.
That's okay. I've got it right here. So this was one of Tolkien's notes from the essay, or one of his essays that's in there, and it does say, there are on Earth incarnate creatures, elves and men. These are made of a union of Hroa and Fea, roughly, but not exactly equivalent to body and soul. And that's all he says.
Roughly, but not exactly. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. That's what I had in mind when I said that it's not exactly the same, but I don't really think I have any real idea of what the difference is. So I wanted to come back. Right. I wanted to come back to it and let everybody know that I haven't forgotten it, but I don't think I have an answer to what exactly the difference is. So
that there is no answer, right?
Yeah. Or if there is something out there that I'm missing that one of our listeners knows about that's in one of the other, deep tomes of the history of Middle-earth, let us know.
Please do. Excellent. Well, I think that probably wraps up for Bartleman's mailbag. Shall we go ahead and dive into the chapter?
I think we should. Chapter 3.
I think we should. Lots to talk about here. This one, listeners, we're not going to be seeing as much in terms of the reappearance of themes. This is more just kind of a linear narrative tale. But of course, it's a very, very, very important narrative tale as we get to be introduced to the elves. But there are a lot of really cool little bits and pieces, some tidbits here that we'll enjoy reading and discussing. So let's go ahead and dig in.
A lot of good introduction of families, kindreds, people that we'll see again. So
yeah, that part we definitely want to spend some time on. We want to help you get your arms around that, because I think for the first time readers, especially, it can be a little intimidating. That huge breakdown of all the different kinds of elves and then the Mora Quendi and Cala Quendi, and boy, it gets really Quendi.
Really Quendi indeed.
Quendi is an adjective. That one ends in a Y when you use it as an adjective.
Right. And it's got a KW at the beginning of it.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. Well, I can kick us off here. Sure. I think I'll start us right at the beginning. So we see right here at the very beginning that the Valar are dwelling in bliss. It says, through long ages, the Valar dwelt in bliss in the light of the trees, beyond the mountains of Aman. But all Middle-earth lay in a twilight under the stars. So that's just a little, let's set the mood here.
And through long ages could be tens of thousands of years, let's be clear.
Right, yes. This word ages comes up a few times, and it's, we know with the second age and the third age, we know those are,
ages with a capital
3,000
are different, but yeah.
So yeah, okay, well, I guess that's true, yeah. So those are 3,000+ years. Not sure how long ages with a lowercase a is, but we will see it again. But
we will.
It's definitely a long time, I think we know. And we see the Valar they've got this, they're living in bliss. They're keeping the light of the trees to themselves in Valinor. Mm-hmm. I don't really see that this as being the Valar's best moment, to be honest. And I think you'll probably agree based on some of the stuff we talked about.
You know, they might be being a little bit more active. I mean, at this point, I suppose they think, well, our job's done. I guess we're just going to wait for those elves to show up.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that only two of the Valar in particular really leave Valar and do anything else. That is, Yavanna and Orome do come back to Middle Earth, and they don't abandon. But it's interesting that we don't see much of what Orome does. Presumably he hunts. But Yavanna puts a sleep upon the things that had arisen in the spring when the lamps were around, so that they wouldn't age and die, but that then they can wake up when the time is right.
Yeah, she's preparing for the future in a way that the other Valar really are not at this point.
No,
they seem
they're very
just
passive.
Sort of living for the present and enjoying the light of the trees. And there was a reference in one of the earlier chapters to Orome going out and hunting. So I think you're right. I think he probably was out there hunting.
Yeah. And I think there's even a
horrible
reference
things
later
where he
in this
saw
chapter.
Yeah. That's true. There is. You're right.
At this point, he might not have been hunting the horrible things. He may have just been hunting game.
Could have been
deer or something like that. But
could have been.
We do see real soon.
But there
some
are evil things walking abroad. Yeah.
Yes, and we start to see that while the Valar are ignoring Middle Earth, Melkor is not, and that he continues to build his strength. And it's interesting. It says here that he slept not, but watched and labored. Now, the Valar may not have been sleeping in the bliss of the light of the trees, but they certainly don't seem to be watching or laboring a whole heck of a lot.
Right.
And during this time, the evil things that he had perverted walked abroad. I want to come back to that because later on in that same paragraph, after they talk about the Balrogs, which we'll get to, and in that dark time, Melkor bred many other monsters of diverse shapes and kinds. So we get that he perverted some things that are walking abroad, and now he's bred other monsters of diverse shapes and kinds. Not a coincidence that he didn't create these. That's not the word he used here for very obvious reasons. This is not, again, a subcreative act. This is a dominating act and a perverting, twisting act. So, yeah, just a little bit different.
Breeding really does give the idea of just sort of taking things that already exist and mashing them together in ways to create
genetic stew.
Not create, but to make new.
Right. I can't make a flower out of nothing, but I can take two flowers that are different colors or different kinds and make a new one and make something that's different.
Right.
To breed things is very, very different from a genuinely subcreative act. Mm-hmm. But he's certainly busy. Whatever it is that he's doing, he's busy, and all sorts of bad things are happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's interesting. We'd see the Balrogs again. He gathers his demons about him, those spirits who first adhered to him in the days of his splendor. Their hearts were of fire, but they were cloaked in darkness, and terror went before them. They had whips of flame. And I'm looking real tightly, I'm looking really close for the part about that they also had wings. But I'm not seeing it, Sean. I'm not seeing it.
I'm not seeing it either, Alan. I'm not. Yeah, well, we could go down a rabbit hole with that one.
We could. Yeah, we'll go down that another time, like when it's very clear.
I don't see any definitive evidence that they have wings, except for Ralph Bakshi's cartoon. I think started the whole thing. But what I do think is really interesting about the Balrogs here is that we see that they were the spirits that first adhered to him in the days of his splendor.
The first ones that fell.
Mm-hmm. And so, I think these are the ones who fell with him, the first ones that attuned themselves to his music rather than the theme of Ilúvatar in the Ainulindale.
Yep.
Then fell with him. And there's a really powerful image of, them literally falling. And I'm probably inserting,
the Star of the Two Towers. Yeah.
Well,
the visual of the Balrog falling.
Actually, well, there is that. That's true. But I think I'm just thinking of, maybe
wings aren't of much use
other
now,
works
are
of
they,
literature,
punk?
Sorry. Yeah. If he had wings, why did he fall off the mountain?
Anyway, that's gonna keep
all right. Sorry, everybody. But no, I think I'm probably thinking of other things like, I don't know, like Paradise Lost or something like that.
Oh,
where you
okay,
see,
yeah.
you know,
Totally.
angels thrown out of heaven and just, you know, landing and catching fire as they fall. It's just a really
It's a vivid image.
magnificent image.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting about that is if that is correct, if the Balrogs are the ones who attuned themselves to Melkor in the beginning, then that means that all of his other Ainurin servants were the ones that were seduced later on, and that makes me think of Sauron primarily.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's fascinating. We don't see much more of that, and we don't really see what brought Sauron over to Melkor. But
No, because we know that he was a Maiar of Aule. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had come to Arda in the service of Aule before Melkor corrupted him, it would seem.
Right.
But
yeah, that's true. Yeah, the notion that he was affiliated with another Vala at first does suggest that he came into Arda before.
I mean, it may be that he was associated with Aule ahead of previously. I mean, before they all entered Arda.
Could be.
Hard to know, but yeah, that's
pure
a very
speculation.
good point.
But I think it's a fascinating distinction to make.
It is that the Balrogs, were those the initial ones that fell. They were the ones who first adhered to him, and I like this. They became most like him in his corruption. Mm-hmm. They really do. They embody this just pure, unadulterated evil.
They kind of lose their own identity.
They do.
When you think of Sauron, certainly
one Balrog's
personality.
very much like another, aren't they?
Right. Right. Yeah. Sauron's got a personality, and some of Melkor's other servants. I guess we're not sure how many of those are actually Maiar or not, but you get the idea that they have their own personalities, whereas Balrogs are just monsters.
Oh yeah. And you'll see the Red Maw. You know who I'm talking about, in Beren and Luthien. The
Karkaroth.
Yeah, Karkaroth. I couldn't. I knew his name. I just couldn't remember it.
Well, I knew the translation Red Maw, which I think is actually a literal translation of his name.
I think it is.
So,
yeah. It's always insightful to see these little bits and pieces and kind of start to put things together into how his servants came to be. And they're kind of their hierarchy, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But Sauron, of course, really is at the very top of the list of his servants. He may not have been the first one to fall, but he's certainly the right-hand man, the lieutenant.
Absolutely.
And in this case, right now, he is commanding Angband, which is over closer to the sea, in order to prevent any attack from Valinor.
From Valinor, right. So it's a fortress and armory not far from the northwestern shores of the sea.
Yeah. The maps, I have to tell you, the maps in the book are not uber useful because a lot of the stuff that's in the north is cut off of the map. What would you, the recommendation I would make would be if anybody get a hold of the Atlas of Middle-earth by Karen Fonstad. That's probably the best overall resource that I would recommend. In fact, we'll put that in our show notes. That is a spectacular resource. But are there any others that you can think of off the top of your head, especially for this first age stuff?
I feel like that's the best one that I've seen.
Pretty authoritative.
I've seen other maps that attempt to depict, particularly later in this chapter, where it talks about how Aman and Middle-earth sort of come together in the north at the Helcaraxa.
Yep.
But
you got to say that word first. I love that.
You like how I work that in?
Yeah. You and your Sindarin words. Your Quendian words.
I love them. I think I say them in my sleep sometimes. My wife has been complaining.
Oh man.
But yeah, I think I've
in your
seen...
sleep again, Sean.
Right. I'm dreaming in Elvish. I think I've seen some other pictures, but I don't really feel like they're all that authoritative. Yeah. And so I think the Fonstad book is the best.
It really is. It's really sound. I mean, don't get me wrong. The maps that are in the book are excellent, but the problem is they seem to be limited scope. Mm-hmm. So if you really are into maps and really want to get a handle on things, take a look at that book. I think that'll be helpful. So, okay. Well, now we get to see the Valar prepare for the coming of the Elves.
Finally.
Yeah, I know. Get your act together, people.
Yeah.
Melkor's been at it for a while. I love this. Yavanna, who's kind of the peaceful one, right? I mean, she's, the green, she's the hippie chick with the trees. She's a tree hugger. No, she's the hawk here.
She absolutely is. Yeah.
She makes it very clear. Look, we don't know when this is going to happen, but be sure of this. And this is right here at the flip of the page. So we're at the top of 48. The hour approaches, and within this age, our hope shall be revealed, and the children shall awake. Shall we then leave the lands of their dwelling desolate and full of evil? Shall they walk in darkness while we have light? Shall they call Melkor Lord while Manwë sits upon Taniquetil? Taniquetil. I know, we've been going, it is Taniquetil.
It is, right.
It's just sometimes hard to get the wrong pronunciations out of your head. So Taniquetil. Okay, there we go.
And I like how you managed to get that one out there first.
Well, yeah. So. Don't worry, you get the big slew of all the cool names coming up.
I know. Thank you for that.
No problem. But, Tulkas, of course, is just rah. Let's do this thing.
He's the first one. Well, he's the first one to agree. Like, yes, let's make war swiftly.
Let's do it.
Before we get off of Yavanna, though, I think her plea to the Valar really reminds me so much of what we saw of her in chapter 2 with her little request about her Kelvar and Olvar.
Yeah.
And wanting to protect them. I mean, this is she's, as you said, she is the hippie chick. She's the tree hugger, but she's also a protective mother.
Very much
she's
so.
Not,
good point.
Though she's not directly the mother of the children of Ilúvatar, she is sort of playing that maternal role and
protective.
Yeah. And I think that's very interesting.
That is. It's a good point.
And we know I love Yavanna, so.
Well, of course we do. She's one of your favorites, no doubt.
She
about
is.
That.
But
Mandos gets to say the answer, though. It's not Manwë. At the bidding, Manwë says, "I'm too tired to speak." Mandos, you tell them. So he lets them know, of course, look, they are going to come in this age, but they're not here yet. And here's the thing. It is doomed that the firstborn shall come in the darkness and shall look first upon the stars. Great light shall be for their waning. To Varda ever shall they call it need. And then you get to read the paragraph.
All right, I guess we'll just jump right in here. So, yeah, let's just do it.
That's what I'm doing. Go for it, buddy.
So then Varda went forth from the council, and she looked out from the height of Taniquetil, and beheld the darkness of Middle-earth beneath the innumerable stars, faint and far. Then she began a great labor, greatest of all the works of the Valar, since their coming into Arda. She took the silver dews from the vats of Telperion, and therewith she made new stars and brighter against the coming of the firstborn. Wherefore she whose name out of the deeps of time and the labors of Ea was Tintale, the kindler, was called after by the elves Elentari, queen of the stars. Carnil and Luinil, Nanar and Lumbar, Alcarinque and Elimire she wrought in that time, and many other of the ancient stars she gathered together and set as signs in the heavens of Arda. Wilwarin, Telemendil, Soronume, and Anarima, and Menelmakar with his shining belt that forebodes the last battle that shall be at the end of days. And high in the north, as a challenge to Melkor, she set the crown of 7 mighty stars to swing, Valakirka, the sickle of the Valar and sign of doom.
I love that passage.
I thank you so much for letting me read that one. That is just one of my favorite passages in the entire book.
It really is. The names of the stars and her name. I love Tintale. What a great name. And Elentari. I mean, just beautiful. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I probably didn't catch the first few times I read this, and this is one of those things that happens when you read the Silmarillion, you're like, oh, hey, I never caught that before. She began a great labor, greatest of all the works of the Valar since they're coming into Arda. So the raising of the mountains and the delving of the valleys, all the things that Aule and Manwë did, and all the things that Ulmo did in creating the seas, pale. This is the greatest of all the works of the Valar.
That's a very good catch.
That's huge. And they mentioned that later, but it is absolutely huge. And it's just stunning to me that one Vala does this. Mm-hmm. She just goes out and this is her job.
It's a reminder of the incomprehensible power that she must have that she very rarely lets shine forth, if I may use a silly pun. I mean, we saw even in Vala Quinta, I believe, where it says that she knows all the ways of Ea. I think she's the only one of the Valar that we hear that of. And sure, it makes sense. She's the stars. And especially here, we see her creating certainly the brightest stars.
Yeah.
Some of these are actually planets. If anybody's interested, there's a Christopher Tolkien has actually done a little. He's found one of his father's papers that said which actual celestial bodies most of these were, which is pretty fascinating. But I won't get into it now.
Fascinating, yeah. You knew they had to be, because when we were talking about the new stars and brighter, we're talking about the planets. We're talking about Venus and Jupiter, and possibly Mars as well. But
Carnil is definitely Mars. Okay. Alcarinque is definitely Jupiter. Venus is actually not here yet.
Oh, interesting. Oh, of course it's not. Hello.
Because Venus has its own origin story later on.
And it's a beautiful origin story. I can't believe that slipped out of my mouth, because I know that.
Well,
the evening star, of course.
Yep,
but
right.
And the names of the stars themselves are of the constellations as well. And I love the Valakirka, the sickle of the Valar, because we know what that is. The 7 mighty stars in the north are what? That's the Big Dipper, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or the plow, as some of our English listeners may know it. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. And so here we are, able to look up at the night sky, and we see the Valakirka, the sign of doom.
Right.
So.
Well, and Menelmacar is Orion
with the
shining belt. Yep. And we'll see in the next paragraph, which I know you're going to read, that Menelmacar seems to be the first one, the first constellation that rises in the sky.
Yeah.
So, that's just so cool.
It is. And I'm going to go ahead and read those next two. And listeners, I know that, I don't know, maybe you prefer us reading and not us discussing, but we tend to think that you prefer us discussing. But these passages are so important, and they're so beautiful, that we just felt like it was really important to read that entire paragraph. And I'm going to read the next two, because we actually get here the awakening of the elves and what their first experiences are. It is told that even as Varda ended her labors, and they were long, when first Menelmacar strode up the sky, and the blue fire of Helluin flickered in the mists above the borders of the world, in that hour the children of the earth awoke, the firstborn of Ilúvatar. By the starlit mere of Cuiviénen, water of awakening, they rose from the sleep of Ilúvatar. And while they dwelt yet silent by Cuiviénen, their eyes beheld first of all things the stars of heaven. Therefore they have ever loved the starlight, and have revered Varda Elentari above all the Valar. In the changes of the world, the shapes of lands and of seas have been broken and remade. Rivers have not kept their courses, neither have mountains remained steadfast, and to Cuiviénen there is no returning. But it is said among the elves that it lay far off in the east of Middle-earth, and northward, and it was a bay in the inland sea of Helkar, and that sea stood where aforetime the roots of the mountain of Iluin had been, before Melkor overthrew it. Many waters flowed down thither from heights in the east, and the first sound that was heard by the elves was the sound of water flowing, and the sound of water falling over stone. So we see that their first sight was the stars, and the first sound was the water. And, it's...
Varda and Ulmo.
Yeah, Varda and Ulmo. And what a beautiful... you can see it. And, of course, when you see it, you end up seeing in your mind the beautiful images that so many artists have created. I'm thinking of Ted Naismith.
Ted Naismith, yeah.
Oh,
that one's beautiful.
Man, really is. And just what a unbelievable moment this is. The awakening of the first of the children of Ilúvatar. This is what it was all about. That's the thing. It's not about the Valar. It's not about the earth. It's about the children of Ilúvatar. All Arda is a habitation.
Habitation for the children of Ilúvatar. And they're finally on the scene.
And the first of them are finally on the scene. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just such a beautiful passage.
It really is.
And interesting that So we see, again, we don't know much about where Cuiviénen is.
No.
We know that it is where the lamp Iluin had been, which is now
northern of the two
northern.
lamps.
Right, that was the northern of the two lamps, and now it's the Sea of Helkar, since the lamp has been thrown down. But there's no returning to it because of the changes of the world. There's something so beautifully sad about that,
isn't it? It does make you think. Again, of certain biblical stories, you think of Eden. The Garden of Eden is no longer
absolutely.
accessible. Yeah. Different thing. I mean, in this case, Cuiviénen is simply no longer. It just doesn't exist. Whereas, at least in the biblical version of that tale, the Garden of Eden is now just inaccessible. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's just you cannot find it, and if you did, it would be guarded by pretty bad angels that would kick your butt, and you wouldn't be able to get in. So,
but so different maybe in the way it's effectuated, but certainly, the fact that the changes of the world are what has made Cuiviénen no more, and of course, as we'll see, the changes that come about because the children fall, and because the world suffers under their folly, and so there is a bit of Eden in that.
Yeah, that's true. Not quite as much because they haven't fallen yet. Their big fall doesn't happen until they get all the way over to Valinor.
Well, that is true. But I guess I had always assumed that the disappearance of Cuiviénen happened later.
Yeah, I don't know when it happened. I'm thinking it happened probably after the battle we're about to see in this chapter. That's my
that could be
my
that
guess.
Could be.
But
in which case the elves' fall would have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, but it's still an interesting thought. Certainly you see that parallel. So then they named themselves the Quendi. Now that word means those that speak with voices. They had not yet met anything else that could speak. They'd met only animals and well, actually not even animals at this point, right?
I don't think so.
Because they hadn't woken up, so it would have been just grasses and trees and.
Well, it says they'd met no other living things that spoke or sang, so it doesn't say they hadn't met any other living things.
Well, I know. Yeah, that's true. I'm looking back at the beginning of the chapter, and Yavanna said asleep upon many things that had arisen in the spring. That doesn't mean all things. So we know that the great weeds in the sea, the shadow of great trees, and there were dark creatures old and strong in the valleys of the night-clad hills. So there were creatures. I love this. There's a little line here, and on a time it chanced that Orome rode eastward, and then later we see the start of the next paragraph. Thus it was that the Valar found at last, as it were by chance, those whom they had so long awaited. I think you and I both know where we're going with this. The idea that this was actually mere chance is pretty slim.
Yeah, I agree.
Chance is not something that we... Chance is just another word for providence, for Ilúvatar causing certain things. Now, maybe not so much the first line about Orome, that Orome was there on his own, but I don't think it was a coincidence that it was Orome and that he found them when he found them. But
I think chance is a word for... Certainly in the context of the Silmarillion, we can say that chance is a word for Ilúvatar knows what's going on, but nobody else does.
Right.
And so maybe chance is a word that a name that we give to something that we don't understand.
We see it kind of just like what we talked about in the last episode about we give the name death to this thing that now that we've named it is a bad thing, but it was never intended to be that way. This we call it chance, but really. And as Gandalf points out, if chance it were, when he's talking about the chance meeting with Thorin. But no chance. But in that
no chance,
no chance that there's chance. No, I'm just
right.
In that same paragraph, in fact, I'll finish that paragraph if that's okay, and then
can I linger on that one more moment because
Please.
I'm thinking about the fact that Let's think about this idea of chance and the fact that this was actually Ilúvatar's doing.
Okay.
The Valar were not doing anything themselves, and so it finally so happens that Orome is the one to find them. Maybe it's not as profound as it seemed in my head a moment ago, but
is anything ever that profound?
But it gives you this idea that the Valar aren't doing anything, so Ilúvatar is going to make it so.
Yeah. Well, I think there is something to that, because as we find out, Orome was not the first of the Ainur to find the elves.
That is true.
Melkor found them first.
Yes, he did.
And, and that led to some very bad things, as we're about to see. And the fact that the Valar had been relatively passive and not, hanging around Middle-earth looking for the elves, checking under the rocks. Hey, did you check between the couch cushions, Ale? I mean, come on. But, Orome's out there hunting, and there's every reason why the elves woke up where they did and when they did. Mm-hmm. The awakening was not something that the elves did themselves. They didn't wake themselves up. They didn't set an alarm. They didn't, call the front desk and ask for a wake-up call. Ilúvatar woke them up. Did he wake them up because he knew Orome was finally in the neighborhood? I think so.
Probably so, yeah.
That's my hunch. But, that's a good point. Yeah, it's... if they had just been a little more active and found them earlier. But
yeah.
Thus it was that the... Go ahead, sorry.
Well, the Valar are going to... The Valar do a few things in this chapter that... They don't make the best choices in this chapter.
No, they don't. They make one good choice, and we'll see specifically that they make it because of the Council of Ilúvatar.
Yes.
And that's key. But yeah, some of their other choices aren't really what we wanted them to be, and their motivations even might not have been ideal. They're not bad motivations, but they weren't as good as they could have been.
Right.
But let's take a look at the rest of this passage I want to read, because this last sentence of this paragraph is really deep. So we'll just start back with thus it was. Thus it was that the Valar found at last, as it were by chance, those whom they had so long awaited. And Orome, looking upon the elves, was filled with wonder, as though they were beings sudden and marvelous and unforeseen. For so it shall ever be with the Valar. From without the world, though all things may be forethought in music, or foreshown in vision from afar, to those who enter verily into Ea, each in its time shall be met at unawares as something new and unforetold. They heard about him in the music, saw them in the vision. It is nothing like experience.
Like they imagined.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking that it's like the book knowledge. You could spend years reading about a person, and it would be nothing like the experience of meeting that person.
That's true, yeah.
Experiential knowledge and book knowledge, which is essentially what we're looking at here, are two vastly different things. And in a way, just what a beauty this is for the Valar, because they knew they were coming. They knew what they'd be like. They knew that they'd be, independent, that they'd be creations of Ilúvatar, that they had nothing to do with them, that they were more like their peers, that they were, because they're both children of Ilúvatar. But they had no idea what it was really going to be like. And so all of a sudden, they're marvelous and sudden and unforeseen.
Well, and reading between the lines, remember that the Valar love the children of Ilúvatar so much because they are so marvelous and so mysterious to them. Imagine that if the children were more marvelous than they could have guessed, imagine that the love that they feel is so much greater than they could have ever guessed. And so you really do see, so while the Valar are going to make some not so great choices in this chapter, and I can be kind of flippant about that, but I think they clearly do what they do for love of the children.
Oh, yeah.
And because they love the children so much.
Yeah. Almost too much. Almost like a 4-year-old loves his teddy bear too much or something.
Well, a bit. And, we'll get to that in a moment. But, yeah, there's a bit of that sort of possessive love there, too, I think.
Exactly. Well, I know there were some other things in the next couple paragraphs that you wanted to touch on about the nature of the elves, their strength, but their beauty. Yes.
So looking for my page here. So we do see that, I'll read just a quick passage here, that in the beginning the elder children of Ilúvatar were stronger and greater than they have since become, but not more fair. For though the beauty of the Quendi in the days of their youth was beyond all other beauty that Ilúvatar has caused to be, it has not perished, but lives in the west, and sorrow and wisdom have enriched it. It's a pretty deep sentence to unpack. I think there's a lot going on
Who comes
there.
to mind when you read that last bit? Sorrow and wisdom.
Sorrow and wisdom certainly reminds us
of two people. I think of Nienna and I think of Nienna with sorrow. It's also wisdom, though, too, right? That's where Gandalf
Olorin did learn wisdom from
Nienna.
sorrow. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right with that.
Yeah,
I also think
Nienna.
I also think it's notable that their beauty is still they're still as beautiful as they ever were, because that beauty lives on in the West.
Yeah, more so.
Right, it's been enriched. You're right.
But it's in the West, and I think that's key too. It is only in the West that the elves that are still in Middle Earth in the times that we think of, like in the Third Age, they, as beautiful as they are not as beautiful as the ones that are in the West.
Right.
Yeah, the ones that are in the West, especially the ones who were there when the trees were there, are far, far more beautiful.
And especially those who stayed.
Oh yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I'm thinking of the high elves. I'm sorry, the fair elves.
The Vanyar. Yeah,
the fair elves, the Vanyar. The high elves actually describes all three. We'll get to that.
Right. Yeah.
We'll get to that. The crazy nomenclature later on.
We'll be there very soon, folks.
Yeah, we will. I promise. Yeah, definitely a little Nienna influence, and I love that their beauty is actually greater, but their strength has since faded. And that's not surprising.
Mm-hmm. And then the next thing, I'm not going to read the passage, but there's just this next sentence where it talks about why Orome calls them the Eldar.
The people of the stars.
The people of the stars. And so that was his name for the elves, for reasons that should probably be fairly obvious now.
Yeah.
Because they awakened under the stars. But then that name was after only borne by those who followed him upon the westward road. So the summons that we're about to see, only those that actually follow the summons become the Eldar going forward.
And that's, again, one of the splits, one of the nomenclature splits. We'll get to that. We'll spend our the last big chunk of time in the podcast today on that split. But then we get the fact that not all of the Quendi were attracted to Orome's arrival. Some of them actually were afraid and hid and ran away. This is really the sad stuff here. I'm going to let you take this part for by after knowledge.
Mm-hmm. So, for by after knowledge, the wise declare that Melkor, ever watchful, was first aware of the awakening of the Quendi, and sent shadows and evil spirits to spy upon them and waylay them. So it came to pass, some years ere the coming of Orome, that if any of the elves strayed far abroad, alone or few together, they would often vanish and never return. And the Quendi said that the hunter had caught them, and they were afraid. I should probably stop there. We could go on,
right.
But
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So
stepping on your lines.
That's I think the important part of this paragraph, because we see that Melkor has actually, as you said a moment ago, Melkor found the elves first, and right away he started sowing lies and discord to make them, because he must have had some knowledge that Orome would find them, and so he plants these tales of this hunter that is coming to get them, when in reality it is Melkor who is snatching them out of the darkness, as we're going to see in, I think, the next paragraph.
It was a good hunch of his. I mean, obviously he couldn't have known that it would be Orome, but he probably was aware that Orome and Yavanna were the only two that were showing up. His spies, his creatures that were about would have at least been encountering them at some point, I'm sure. Probably hunted by them in the case of Orome. So, he had a pretty good shot, a 50-50 chance that it was going to be Orome. He probably had some stories out there about some tree woman, too, and we just don't find out about those because it wasn't Yavanna who found them.
Right.
I'm sure he covered both his bases there. But the ones that ran away...
But it does say that Melkor hated and feared... Where was it? Yes, greatly hated and feared the riding of Orome. So,
Yeah, but so some of them, some of them hid, some of them ran away, and unfortunately, those are the ones that we find out were turned into orcs, and there's no small evil there.
This is one of the saddest.
It really is.
Passages.
It's heartbreaking, and yeah, go ahead. Yet this is held true. I think would probably be a good spot to start.
It's a hard one, but so prefaced by what happens to the one that Melkor got snatched out of the darkness. Yet this is held true by the wise of Eresea, that all those of the Quendi who came into the hands of Melkor ere Utumno was broken were put there in prison, and by slow arts of cruelty were corrupted and enslaved. And thus did Melkor breed the hideous race of the Orcs, in envy and mockery of the Elves, of whom they were afterwards the bitterest foes. For the Orcs had life and multiplied after the manner of the children of Ilúvatar, and naught that had life of its own, nor the semblance of life, could ever Melkor make, since his rebellion in the Ainulindale before the beginning. So say the wise.
Yeah.
And deep in their dark hearts the Orcs loathed the master whom they served in fear, the maker only of their misery. This, it may be, was the vilest deed of Melkor, and the most hateful to Ilúvatar.
I believe that.
Yeah.
It's just such a twisting, such a perversion.
Yeah.
Such a mockery.
So it's, this has been alluded to in a few places in Tolkien's works that the Orcs, came from elves. It's even mentioned in, Peter Jackson's movies.
Yeah, he mentioned
there's a brief mention of it. The details of the twisting are never made clear, and it's probably a good thing.
Probably for the best.
But it is very clear that they had to be from elves because Melkor cannot create things himself. And the fact that orcs have life and they multiply, they reproduce the way the children of Ilúvatar do. That means that they must have come from the children of Ilúvatar. And this last sentence about, they loathed the master whom they served in fear. They hated Melkor they still hate Melkor for what he did to them, the maker only of their misery. And it's just a brutal passage.
It really is. And it brings up a whole lot of questions. I know that people have just 1,000 questions on the nature of the orcs. We'll have to look into that one, folks. One would ask, well, if they're, perversions of the elves, are they immortal like the elves? Do they get sick, or do they age, or do they have to die in battle? What happens to their Fëanor?
Wow.
Some big questions. Then we get the afterlife of the orcs. We see a lot of questions, and I have to tell you, Sean and I don't have the answers to those right now. That may be something we look into. It may not. It's the fact is, the orcs are hideous. Mm-hmm. They are a tragedy. They are an evil, just an absolutely evil act done by Melkor. You have to realize that for him to continue to create the orcs, he would have to every so often go in and kidnap more elven females and breed them to these hideous creatures.
Yeah.
And he'd have to do this over and over, generation after generation. And what an evil. This is, I think, why it could
it's horrifying.
Be unqualified, an absolutely no exception to it, the most hateful act to Ilúvatar. To take his children and to do this. It's an ugly thing, and you don't really, unless you start to think about it that way, you don't think about just how ugly it is. It's not like he put them into the transmogrifier, pushed a button, and out pops Shagrat and Gorgard.
It
took generations.
It's not, and I think the movie's sort of glossed over it. I think the line Saruman speaks of something about tortured and mutilated, and
I think they had to be super
bit
careful
more than that,
because I'm not sure that there's a lot of references in the books that are licensed. That is in the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that's a good point. So they maybe couldn't say more.
They really couldn't say more, because then they'd be tapping into this material, which is not available, to be made into films. much to the chagrin of so many people.
I was thinking of it purely from a decency perspective, not so much from the legal perspective. But you're right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Peter Jackson wouldn't care so much from the decency perspective, and I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean that's probably not his big problem. His issue would have been, the lawyers say we can't do anymore.
Right? Yeah, probably true. But yeah, it's horrible stuff.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, I mean the vilest deed of Melkor and the most hateful to Ilúvatar is it's
not an understatement.
Not at all, and it's just such a solid way to punctuate that paragraph.
It really is. Well, now Orome takes back news of the elves to the other Valar. Takes it back to Valinor, and they were trying to figure out what should they do about this. What can they do to help them in dealing with Melkor? So. We're going to pick up a couple paragraphs later here. Manwë sat long in thought upon Taniquetil, and he sought the counsel of Ilúvatar. Let's stop right there and note that. He sought the counsel of Ilúvatar. Mm-hmm. It would be nice if they did that later, but they did that here, so right decision. And coming then down to Valmar, he summoned the Valar to the Ring of Doom, and thither came even Ulmo from the outer sea. Then Manwë said to the Valar, "This is the counsel of Ilúvatar in my heart," keeping in mind that Manwë was closest to Ilúvatar, that he knew Ilúvatar's purposes more than the others. That we should take up again the mastery of Arda at whatsoever cost, and deliver the Quendi from the shadow of Melkor. Now, Tulkas is ecstatic, because yay, we get to fight.
He's cracking his knuckles.
He's like, yep. There we go. Little sound effects for you folks.
Oh, very nice.
But Aule was grieved because he just knows it's going to be more work for him. I'm going to have to put in some overtime this week, Ivana.
Yep.
I'm sorry about that.
Going to have to rebuild some mountains.
And redelve some valleys, foreboding the hurts of the world. They resolved to assault the fortresses of Melkor and make an end. Mm-hmm. So Melkor holds a grudge against the elves for that. Not against the Valar.
Never did he forget.
He never forgot.
That the war was made for their sake.
And that they were the cause of his downfall. Pardon me. So there's a big war. Yeah. He meets them in the northwest of Middle-earth. That whole region is just torn up.
Yeah.
The first victory is swift.
Before we get too far from that, I've just lost my page here. Oops. But I want to go to this notion of Manwë saying we will take up again the mastery of Arda. And I'm sorry, I've lost the page, so I can't read it.
That is at the very bottom of 50 and top of 51.
Thank you very much. Yes, that we should take up again the mastery of Arda at whatsoever cost. My reaction to that is, again, dude, weren't you supposed to be mastering Arda all along?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that why you're here?
And it looks like what they'd done is they'd retreated and were only masters over Oman.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is one of those poor choices. It's not, the Valar are not really. They're doing the right thing now, as you say. Manwë consulting Ilúvatar, but yeah, I mean, they've been idle for how many ages?
Far too idle.
They have been idle, and now they have a crisis on their hands.
Yeah.
So
that's a very good point. No, you're right. That's something I'd never caught. The again. That we should take up again the mastery of Arda.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that means you did lose the mastery of Arda.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost as though they threw up their hands, like, oh well, I guess we got to take it back now. They were, I think they were literally content to let Melkor just run wild, not realizing what problem they were creating. But
right. And boy, with the creation of the Orcs alone,
absolutely,
what a problem that's been.
Yeah. By the way, and one more thing, we talked about, you mentioned the Ring of Doom. Have we had a chance to say the Quenya name of the Ring of Doom on the podcast?
Not yet, and don't you dare.
You can have that one. I'll let you gave me all the stars. I'll let you have that.
We get that later. I think we get that. I think certainly after Fëanor, I think is when we get the name of that. But
do I have to wait that long?
You might have to wait that long.
Okay. I can wait.
Oh man, I'm trying to find exactly where it is, just so that you can. Wow, you are going to have to wait a while. Yeah. It might have to. It is. It might be of the flight of the Noldor, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, we'll wait.
Well, you get all the cool words, so yeah.
I'll let you have that one when we get to it. By the way, it was in chapter 1, but I think we missed our chance.
Did we? I mean, did we not mention it though?
I'm not sure if we did. I have to go back and listen to that one again.
Well, if we actually if it's over something we've already discussed, then we should be able to talk about it. I'm looking for it right now just to find it. Mahanaxar, the
Mahanaxar. Mahanaxar, one of my favorite words in Quenya. Okay,
it is.
We can move on now.
Mahanaxar is a great word. All right,
I had to get that one.
I caved. I was going to hold off until the next time we said it, but okay. All right, so big war, big war. First victory of the host was swift. The servants of Melkor fled. Interestingly, they set a guard over Cuiviénen. So Cuiviénen, not yet unable to be found, still there. Mm-hmm. So clearly it's only after that this happens. It might be even later than this that Cuiviénen goes away. But they set a guard there, and so the Quendi now know nothing of the great battle, the great battle of the powers, other than, earthquakes and big lights in the sky and all sorts of horrible noises. I'm sure
thunder in the heavens, and angry eagles flying.
It's thunder. It's not a thunderstorm. It's a thunder battle. Oh, boy. So in that time, the shape of Middle-earth was changed, and the great sea that sundered it from Aman grew wide and deep, and it broke in upon the coasts and made a deep gulf to the southward. Many lesser bays were made between the great gulf and Helcaraxe, far in the north, where Middle-earth and Aman came nigh together. Of these, the Bay of Balar was the chief, and into it the mighty river Syrian flowed down from the new raised highlands northwards, Dorthonion, and the mountains about Hithlum. The lands of the far north were all made desolate in those days, for there Autumno was delved exceeding deep, and its pits were filled with fires and with great hosts of the servants of Melkor. So we get a change to the geography of Middle-earth. Mm-hmm. The sea widens, gulfs and bays show up. The creation of an entire highlands, the Dorthonion, wasn't there before. Right. The mountains about Hithlum. So big changes. That gives you a pretty good sense of scale in terms of the war. I mean, this is nothing. This isn't
like you said, lands shaking, and it's.
This isn't the Avengers getting into a battle with some cosmic enemy. These are the essentially the gods with a little g,
right?
And so it's a little bigger battle.
Yep. Well, and we see now that that some of these place names that are mentioned here are place names in Beleriand, which is where most of the Silmarillion is going to play out. So
we're going to become very familiar with Dorthonion and with the River Syrian. Yeah.
Right. So you can actually look at the map on page 366 and see, as you mentioned earlier, Alan, there's things like Angband is not on there.
No.
But the more southerly lands, Nor's Autumno, that's right, because I think that would have been more to the northeast. Mm-hmm. But the elves, the lands that elves would later live in. Spoilers, sorry, but those
that's not a huge spoiler.
Those are here on the map, and so you can now see some of these places.
But it's not a full spoiler because we don't know which elves yet.
That's right. We are about to.
We are. So then, and they capture him. They capture, but let's take a look at how it happens, because really, Tulkas stood forth as champion of the Valar and wrestled with Melkor.
Oh, that's such a good one,
and cast him upon his face. And he was bound with the chain Angainor that Aule had wrought and led captive. And the world had peace for a long age. Angainor. Did I get that one right?
I think so, yeah.
The AI would be I, so it's Angainor or Angainor.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. I couldn't tell about the pronunciation on that one. I'll have to listen. I won't listen to Martin Shaw because the poor guy doesn't quite get everything right. But boy, if I could read like him, I wouldn't have to pronounce all my words right either.
It's a very good reading despite a few mispronunciations.
It is. It really is. And again, if you guys, listeners, if the audiobooks are spectacular, Martin Shaw does do a phenomenal job. He just doesn't know how to pronounce Maedhros and Maglor and Ilúvatar, among others. But anyway.
I actually just looked it up. It looks like it is Angainor.
Angainor. That's what I thought.
Yep.
Absolutely. I love that everything has names. Just a chain. A chain. Yeah. Well, not just any chain. Aule wrought the chain.
It is a very special chain, and Tolkien seems to have abandoned the origin story of the chain, which is in the Book of Lost Tales.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's been so long since I'd read that.
Yeah, he does have a story about the chains making and the 6 or 7, I think 6 different metals that Aule alloyed together to make it. It's a really cool.
I'll have to go back to
story.
What a cool story.
Yeah, I don't know how much stock to put in it because it's not in the final Silmarillion, but it's a cool story. It's in Book of Lost Tales, Volume 1. Which is Volume 1 of the History of Middle-earth.
Yeah, and which is pretty much the early drafts of the Silmarillion.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So he's got this chain. He's dragged back to Valinor, bound hand and foot, manacles on his wrists and feet. He's blindfolded. I don't think I ever caught that before. So he doesn't even see where he's going. And he's laying on his face before the feet of Manwë. I have to wonder, and it doesn't say here, is his suing for pardon, is it truly genuine? Is he repentant? One's got to assume he's not, that he's past the point of even being able to be repentant. But he sues for pardon, and of course the answer is no. Your bail is denied. You're going into Mandos. And I love this little bit. This line just speaks nicely. Whence none can escape, neither Vala, nor elf, nor mortal man. Mm-hmm. Vast and strong are those halls, and they were built in the west of the land of Aman. So here we get the ages again, right? There was Melkor doomed to abide for 3 ages long before his cause should be tried anew. Mm-hmm. Again, we don't know how long these ages are. We do know that it's not that many chapters longer before he's, pleading again. So we have really no idea, but thousands of years at the least.
Yeah, certainly. It's mind-boggling. Some of the timeline of the early Silmarillion, isn't it?
It's massive. Yeah. The stories that we see. I mean, when you think about the Lord of the Rings, now there's 60 years between the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings.
Right.
That's peanuts compared to this. This is
we've got a few thousand years and a few pages.
It just made me think of A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. About you think it's a long way down to the chemist. That's peanuts compared to space. Oh, man, I have too much of that book memorized.
That's a good reference.
We'll always try to get in some cool references, right?
Every chance we get.
Last time it was Princess Bride. So
Princess Bride. We got some Douglas Adams in.
Yeah. Oh, we almost got some Monty Python in, but we'll leave that out.
I'm sure we'll have lots more opportunities for Monty Python.
I'm sure we will.
Oh, man.
Goodness.
All right. So Melkor's imprisoned.
Yeah, and now the Valar gather again in council. This is interesting. You'll note that it's not mentioned here, and probably because it didn't happen. Manwë didn't say, you know what? Hold on a second. Let me go get the will of Ilúvatar. Mm-hmm. He doesn't do that. Instead, they gather in council and they're divided in debate. Now, I find it interesting that Ulmo is the only one named here in terms of the debate and what side he's on. He's on the side that holds that the elves should be left free to walk in Middle-earth, that they should actually help order the lands and heal their hurts.
Yep.
That they should actually get a job. These other guys are all like, oh, come on, these millennials, we can bring them back into our basement. We got some room. And
remember that Ulmo always liked to spend time in Middle-earth. He's the one who never set up a house in Valinor.
Exactly.
He never wanted to abandon is a strong word, but he never wanted to withdraw from Middle-earth.
That's a better way. And so, you have to wonder, is this a little bit of, I don't know, just like the other Valar in a way are acting selfish in summoning them to Valinor. You wonder if Ulmo's motivations were a little bit more like, hey, I'd like to hang out with them some more. So let him stay in Middle-earth. But I do think it's interesting that he wants them to have a job, while the rest of the Valar want them to come and be safe.
Right.
It's very much like, mom and dad about the kid, who's just graduated from his, master's degree program in some field that will never get him a job. And the dad's like, come on, he needs to stay where he is and get work. And the mom's like, but I'm afraid for him in this dangerous world amid the deceits of the starlit dusk.
If only arguments in my house had been so poetic.
But it is interesting. I like this. The most part, that is the larger part of the Valar, feared for the Quendi in the dangerous world. And I don't want to make fun of the text anymore. Amid the deceits of the starlit dusk. And they were filled, moreover, with the love of the beauty of the elves and desired their fellowship. So it seems like they're motivated more by that, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think we're getting back to that possessive love we were talking about a little while ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an evil thing.
No.
But it's a thing that ends up being a little harmful. Well,
it's kind of a statement. It's kind of a fool. Well, the last sentence of the paragraph.
Yeah, we're gonna
make it very clear. But it is kind of a foolish thing.
It really is.
It's misguided.
It's a selfish thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And desiring their fellowship. Really, why? You've got each other. You've got the Maiar that are there. If you want to go hang out with the elves, guess what? Pick up and go to Middle Earth. Mm-hmm. You don't have to stay in Aman.
Right. But especially now that Melkor's been dealt with.
Exactly. Okay, Mandos has to stay there. Somebody's got to watch the jail.
Somebody's got to be the jailer, yeah.
But, Mandos, speaking of Mandos, we get a line from him here. Mm-hmm. So at last, and this is such a momentous point here in the text, at the last, therefore, the Valar summoned the Quendi to Valinor, there to be gathered at the knees of the powers in the light of the trees forever. And Mandos broke his silence, saying, so it is doomed. From this summons came many woes that afterwards befell.
And there
when Mandos breaks his silence, sometimes it's better to just keep him quiet.
Yeah. But I think we mentioned a few episodes ago, when Mandos speaks, it's not often, but pay attention when he does.
Always.
And Tolkien is usually pretty good about foreshadowing what's going to happen. And from this summons came many woes that afterwards befell.
Many woes.
And I guess it's a good thing they did, because we've got a wonderful book out of it.
That's true. For some reason, I was thinking of that old television commercial, when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
When Mando speaks, Valar listen.
We're definitely dating ourselves with that.
I know. Well, you're not kidding. That was, I probably watched that when, I probably saw that during reruns of Get Smart or something. I'm really dating myself there.
Yep.
Missed me by that much.
Oh, man.
See, well, we got to get Smart reference in there. Really?
Yeah, exactly. We're getting all the references.
Television. We're rolling now.
Yeah. But I think that I think what we're getting at with all this stuff is the Valar are fallible, and we've talked about that before. They don't always know what Ilúvatar's plan is. They don't always know what the right course of action is.
Correct.
Sometimes they are motivated by selfish desires. We saw it with Aule. We saw it with Yavanna. We see it here.
Well, and it's not their job. Their job is to make the world for the children,
right?
Not to enjoy their beauty and fellowship.
Right.
True. That's a side effect.
That's true. And Arda is meant to be the habitation of the children of Ilúvatar, not just Aman.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not.
It kind of goes back to the fact that it really goes back to the trees. I think if we had been able to keep the lamps, and there would have been light across all the earth,
the symmetrical earth,
then maybe the Valar wouldn't be quite so reluctant to come out of their fortress. But having seen what happened, because we can't have nice things because Melkor's around, they create the trees. They hide them behind a.
You're right.
You're right. Yeah. They create the trees. They hide them behind a fence of the tallest mountains in the world, the earth,
and they raise them even higher. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's nice that they want to share that with the elves, but I think trying to keep all that in Valinor at its heart is kind of misguided in a way.
It really is. And that's unfortunate. But in the end, they came willingly. I mean, at first they didn't want to, but then they sent the ambassadors over. And when they came back, they had seen the trees and said, guess what, guys? These trees, I desire greatly the light and splendor of the trees. Let's go. So they do come willingly, and that's important because later on we're going to hear that. You know, there's another famous character whose name starts with Fea and rhymes with more, who will claim that they were brought over as thralls.
It starts with Fea and ends with Nor.
I said more. M
I
as in Mary.
I know, but I just said, yeah. Still, it's funny.
Oh, man. And I know that's a little bit of a spoiler alert, but really, he's a pretty major character, and I think just looking at the chapter titles gives that away.
Yeah.
But his argument later would be that they were brought as thralls, and this fact that they came willingly, that they counseled, that the ambassadors counseled the rest of the people to heed the summons of the Valar, that it was a willing decision, and that's important.
Yeah. Well, and we see that, not all of them did come. So, there certainly was a choice there. Those who did not want to come stayed behind.
Yeah. And that's the first split of the elves, isn't it?
The first split is into the Eldar and the Avari. Eldar being, of course, those that follow the summons, as we mentioned, and then Avari, which literally means the unwilling.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a very long time before they would meet again. Well, now we kind of talk about that big and important breakdown of the elvish kindreds. Rather than reading... Go ahead.
Well, I think we're going to say the same thing. Rather than reading the text, maybe we just kind of talk through what the different
I think that's going to help.
Are.
It's going to help listeners to really get a grasp on this, because it did take us at least a few times to really get this down.
And I think we start with those three ambassadors that you mentioned,
I think
because they do become
kings.
patriarchs and kings of the three kindreds of elves.
Well, of course, it's actually four, right? Because Elwë and Olwë.
True.
They ended up both being lords, but I don't think Olwë went. No,
I think only Elwë went. Yeah.
So the three that went were Ingwë, Finwë, and Elwë. Now, okay, how are you going to remember this? Do you have any sort of mnemonic for this? Because I don't.
I don't. No. I mean,
you're just going to have to tough it out.
Except that, later, there's going to be a lot of Finns in the Noldor. Yeah,
and they're all, that's very easy. The Fs,
Yeah, but no, beyond that, I don't have any advice for that one.
Yeah. But just, breaking them down by
I will say that there are some family trees in the back of the book.
There are.
We've got, I think, page 305, 306.
Yeah, 309 is the big breakdown. That's the useful one.
Yes. I hesitate to point people to 305 and so forth because there are some spoilers in terms of, some of the later generations. But
let's not do that. 309 is a good place to start with the overall groupings. But the way I looked at the text later where it talks about the each of the different breakdown, each of the three different groups of elves. And if we just think of it this way, you've got Ingwë is the king of the Vanyar. They are the fair. They are the fair elves. They go to Valinor and never come back.
Right.
They are beloved of Manwë and Varda. Finwë is the king of the Noldor. They are the deep elves. So Vanyar, fair elves. Noldor, deep elves. They are the friends of Aule. Then you get Elwë and Olwë, largest group. So they've got two lords. They're lords of the Teleri, or the sea elves. Now they end up. It doesn't say in this chapter, but later on we find out that they're closest to, rather than any of the Valar, they're closest to two of the Maiar, Ósë and Uinen.
Right.
So that's a really good, just that three-piece chunk right there is a good place to start. Ingwë, Vanyar, Fair Elves, Manwë, Varda. Finwë, Noldor, Deep Elves, Aule. And then Elwë, Olwë, Teleri, Sea Elves, Ósë and Uinen. So I know I just talked right over everybody's head, but take notes, people. Come on, take notes. Ingwë, Finwë, and Elwë. Vanyar, Noldor, Teleri.
Yep. And as you mentioned, the Vanyar, all of them go and all of them stay.
All of them go and all of them stay. The Noldor, all of them go. Some of them come back. We'll get to that later.
Right.
And the Teleri have the biggest breakdown. They split again, and we'll get to that. That's probably where I think people really get thrown. And
because they split a few times on the road.
They split a few times.
They all leave, and there's so many of them that they end up having two kings, which is where Olwë comes in.
Right.
But then they split several times. Not all of them end up making it.
No. No, and that's key. But that's the thing. If you want to think of it now, those are the three family groupings. If you want to, I mean, the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri, the three more like not family, more like kindred.
Clans,
maybe. Yeah, clans would be a good way of putting it. That's probably the best way of putting it. Some sort of a
tribes,
tribal structure,
tribes.
maybe.
I
I think clan probably works well.
Yeah.
But the way to think about elves overall, there's a primary split that's binary, that's really easy to think about. You've got Calaquendi and Moraquendi. So now these don't apply. You're not looking at like, oh, this is a tribe of elves or a clan of elves. No, Calaquendi and Moraquendi are just ways of describing an elf. Either an elf is Calaquendi or Moraquendi. He is not both. He's not neither. He's one or the other. No question about it. It's every elf can be fit into one slot or the other. The Calaquendi are elves of the light. Those are ones who made it to Aman during the days of the trees. If you never made it to Aman, or if for some reason, and I don't know if there are any that fit into this classification, but if there's anybody who made it to Aman after the trees, any of those people, those would be Moraquendi. If you didn't go, if you didn't get there in time, if you never saw the light of the trees, then you're Moraquendi. And then you can start fitting in the others into how they fit into those two.
That's a really good explanation. And the only question I have there is, so then how does that play out for later generations? So
yeah,
does an elf who's let's say to one of the Noldor who comes back, because the Noldor, the first generation of Noldor would have all been Calaquendi, right? Because they all made it to Valinor, saw the trees.
Yep.
Some of them came back.
Yep.
So then I wonder, their children, and there's not many who are born in Middle Earth.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, the children of them. I'm thinking of somebody like, maybe Myglin's a bad example because he's half Moraquendi anyway.
That's true.
I don't know. I'm even thinking of, maybe somebody like an Elrond or something like that, where he would fit. Though Elrond's kind of a unique case.
Well, he's a unique case too. Yeah,
I don't know.
That's a good point. I mean, if you're descended from Calaquendi, are you Calaquendi? I think we might have to revisit that.
It's an interesting question.
I think certainly there would be a wisdom that you might have access to because of your family, your parents would be able to bestow upon you that Moraquendi elf would not be able to access. But you're right. I mean, somebody who was born of Calaquendi but was born in Middle Earth, so we're talking about Noldor at this point. So a Noldoran elf born in Middle Earth to Noldoran parents who had been in Aman during the days of the trees, would that elf be Calaquendi or Moraquendi? By definition, I'm going to say Moraquendi. They never saw the trees.
They never saw the light, yeah.
They never saw the light. So they'd have to be, so the only Calaquendi are the ones who made it during the days of the trees.
So it really is on an individual by individual basis, whether one fits into the Calaquendi or the Moraquendi. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's not, it isn't tribal or clanish like the others.
Right, it's not genetic. It has to do with whether you've seen the light and the effect that the light of the trees has on you.
Exactly. Yeah. Did you see it? Did you not?
Yeah.
Would there be benefits to being a Moraquendi who was born of Calaquendi? Well, sure, but that doesn't make you Calaquendi. The thing to remember, when we look at that binary split, is that all Vanyar and all Noldor are Calaquendi. All of them. Every last one of them are Calaquendi. And they are also known as High Elves. So both Vanyar and Noldor are High Elves. That's why when I called the Vanyar High Elves, I made a mistake. They're the Fair Elves. The High Elves are both the Vanyar and Noldor. And some of the Teleri, the Teleri that made it. But that's the problem. With the Teleri, it gets so confusing. You get the ones that made it to Aman, or to Tol Eressëa, eventually. It took them quite a while.
Yeah, it took a little while. And Teleri actually, word nerd alert, Teleri actually means the latecomers.
Yes, it does. They are considered Calaquendi. But then there's those that stayed behind in Beleriand. Those are, they're Moraquendi, but they are also called Sindar. That's that particular clan subgroup. And then there's other ones that left the march before the Misty Mountains. They're the Nandor. They're also Moraquendi.
Nandor will also see them referred to as Sylvan Elves.
Yep, they are the Sylvan Elves. Thank you.
Or the Wood Elves.
The Wood Elves, right? And then some of those made it into Beleriand later, and they become the Quendi, or the Green Elves of Assyrian. So you end up with the Quendi, the Nandor, and the Sindar. They are all breakdowns of the Teleri, but they are all Quendi.
Yep.
And that's the thing to remember.
So, lots of splits, especially among the Teleri.
The Teleri are the ones that really make it hard. So if you don't, if you can't quite get your arms around all of them, don't worry about it. Just know that the Sindar and all the other ones that aren't in Tol Eressëa, all of those are Quendi. They're Elves of the Darkness.
Yep.
You're going to see one, not really exception to the rule, but you're going to find out that that Elwë, who did see the light because he was an ambassador, but who ends up never actually making it back. Spoiler alert, but it's in the next chapter, so I'm not too worried. He is Calaquendi because he saw the light, but he ends up being a king over Morquendi, over Sindar.
Over Sindar, yeah.
So that's and we'll get to them next chapter. So I think that's going to be. That's why I didn't feel too bad about kind of spoiling that. But.
No, not at all. It is if you're looking at the page we're on, it's the page right, just to the right of it.
Yeah. I just realized there's one more split just to make it even more confusing. Right. There's the Umanyar, who are the ones that agreed to go but didn't make it. Right. Because we already had that split between the Eldar and the Avari. But there's a branch now of the Eldar called the Umanyar, who are the ones that said, "Okay, we'll go," and then they never made it.
That's right. And the way that's the little phrase on the tree on page 30 whatever we're on 309. Yeah, it's the Eldar who were not of Aman. So it's the ones who actually followed. Right. Yeah, they followed the summons, so that makes them Eldar, but they never made it to Aman.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, this is all very nicely graphically laid out on page 309.
Yeah, 309 will help you, and just make a little flow chart of your own if you need to. This is one that it is pretty important to grasp these breakdowns, especially understanding the Teleri, Noldor, and Vanyar breakdown. But always keeping in mind that Calaquendi, Morquendi distinction and how that's not related to bloodlines. It's related to were you there or were you not?
Right. Well, and I think it's really important to understand why, even if you look at something like Lord of the Rings, where some elves are really a lot more powerful than others. I mean, you look at someone like a Galadriel compared to Legolas or even Thranduil, who we don't see that much of in The Hobbit, but
not in the book.
Not in the book, right? But the reason that Galadriel is so immensely powerful is because she herself is Calaquendi.
Yeah.
She is one who did see the light of Aman, and we're going to meet her very soon anyway, so I'm not spoiling much.
No.
But when you look at folks like Thranduil or Legolas or really most of the other elves you see in Lord of the Rings, I think with the exception of Glorfindel and I guess some of the ones
at the very end we meet
yeah.
Círdan at the Grey Havens.
That's right.
Other than Círdan and Galadriel and Glorfindel, I think all of us are Morquendi.
And even Círdan was Sinda, wasn't he?
No, in fact, I believe there's speculation that he might even be one of the original, the original Awakeners. He would have been one of the original ones at Cuiviénen, and I'd read that someplace. I don't recall where. I think that was more of a speculation, but no, I'm virtually certain.
Well, we'll have to look into that one. But
yeah. Oh wait, no, you're right. He would be Morquendi, even if he is one of the original. He never made it to Aman. He never made it over
because he was of the Philothrum, which we'll see in I think chapter 4, chapter
another
5.
breakdown of the Teleri.
Right. There's the Philothrum who sort of become the shipwrights of Western Middle Earth, which is what Círdan is at the end of Lord of the Rings.
I don't know where my brain went. Well, it's almost 11 o'clock at night my time.
Well, he's immeasurably ancient, certainly. Even if he never made it to Aman.
That's what I was thinking was, well, of course, he's old like those, so he made it. Oh, wait, no, that's right. He was Teleri, and he was one of the Teleri that stayed behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Philathrum. So we'll get to them later.
Yeah.
Now, I know you had a couple little tidbits before we wrap this thing up, I think, right?
I just wanted to end on one little note of foreshadowing. We've been talking a little bit about Elwë, and I just want to point out before we get to Chapter 4, which is going to talk a little bit more about his story, let's just remember this for next time. So this is at the bottom of page 54.
Okay.
So it says, "And the host of the Teleri passed over the misty mountains and crossed the wide lands of Eriador, being urged on by Elwë Singolo. For he was eager to return to Valinor and the light that he had beheld. And he wished not to be sundered from the Noldor, for he had great friendship with Finwë their lord." So we see a couple of things there. First of all, Elwë and Finwë are very close friends. That's going to be important later on.
Yeah.
And also, Elwë was eager to return to Valinor in the light that he had beheld. We saw that all of the ambassadors were eager to return. But I think it's very telling that we see here that it's spoken of again that Elwë was eager to return, because as we're going to see, he is not going to return.
It would take a much greater motivation to keep him.
Yes, and he would have to see something else that he wants to see more.
Ooh, shiny.
So I'll just leave that at that. And anybody who's not read this before and wants to read ahead to the next 1.5 page chapter, feel free, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Well, and in fact, that chapter is so short that you and I decided that our next episode is actually going to cover both Chapter 4 of Thingol and Melian and Chapter 5 of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalia. So
that is correct.
Both chapters. So be sure to read both chapters before the next episode airs, which will be in 2 more weeks.
And in case anyone is wondering, yes, every single chapter title in the Silmarillion begins with the word of.
I think, maybe for the next year or however long it takes to get through this, maybe we should rename the podcast Of the Prancing Pony.
Oh, yeah, and put like something of the Prancing Pony podcast and the ramblings of Alan and Sean.
The ramblings, and the Man of the West and
the real life Lord of the Mark.
There you go. Well, that was a lot more than I thought, but because I actually thought this was going to be a short discussion. Can you believe that? I really did. I thought, well, you know what? There's a lot here, but it's more narrative. It's not going to be, long discussion, and yet, sure enough, yes, it has. But
we always find plenty to say, but we enjoy it, and we hope you listening are enjoying it too.
Well, I hope so. The 17 of you that are listening. I'm kidding. 12, but we do wraps it up for this episode, and we certainly thank you so much for joining us, and we're hoping you'll look forward to the next time with Thingol and Melian and the Princes of the Eldalia. So be sure to tune in.
Yep. As always, if you need cheap paperbacks to mark up, you can use the links on our library page at prancingponypodcast.com.
And we'll add to the show links the Atlas of Middle-earth and the audiobook for the Silmarillion.
Yes, absolutely. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe on iTunes or Google Play Music, and we'd love it if you iTunes users take a moment to write us a review.
And we're thankful to those of you who have.
Thank you to those of you who have. We're also on Stitcher, and we're on TuneIn now as well.
Yay!
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, The Prancing Pony Podcast.
Please do.
There you can get current updates, listen to previous episodes, and interact directly with the two of us. We
love it when you do. When you've got questions, we love that stuff. So
we really do. We really do. So come find us on Facebook or on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
Definitely.
Follow us and retweet us to your friends.
Please do. And send us your questions, comments, or your favorite Mando's party quote to the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com. That's the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com. Well, as always, an hour and 20 minutes is still too short a time to spend amongst such admirable friends. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.